I wanted to preempt this stuff with just a small thing before we get into it. And the reason I want to preempt it is because having watched, I mean, one of the criticisms I got was to watch more James Lindsay. So I watched a ton of James Lindsay. And the one thing that I find very frustrating about any talk that he has online is how, like, surface level it feels. And what I mean by that is you get, and you'll notice that when we watch some of these videos, that you will get a lot of sort of like connections. Like they spend most of their time being like, Marcuse was connected to this person over here who's using Hegel, and Hegel is Marx, and like you'll find like all these connections. And the further question you might want to ask is like, why does this matter? Like, okay, all these things are connected, but why should I care about that? And they never really divulge that information. The the most that I can pick up, and it's in varying things in videos that I don't want to get into, but I did want to highlight some of the things that they point to of like the problems with things like critical race theory or why social justice is bad. Because it's one thing to say they're bad, hey, look at all how it's all connected to Marx, and you might go like me, hey, I like Marx, why is this a problem? But they will go, obviously they have a reason for objecting to it. And so it's important, I think, to at least highlight what they think is the problem, and then we can see as we watch it. I wanted to at least prime that so that like maybe you could pick up on, oh, here he's mentioning this thing which can relate to that point that I had made earlier, or like right now. But even before that, before we get into the reasons they think that this stuff is bad and evil, I also want to say it's really funny because they will talk constantly about how social justice, critical race theory, all these people will use language as a way to sort of obfuscate or confuse. And so it's like, well, they say that this person is racist, but do they mean like individually racist or structurally racist? And da, da, da. And so they use race, like words and language, to manipulate people and obfuscate stuff. This is like a big part of what they say. And yet I feel it's the same way here, right? Which is that they're using all of this language to talk about like Marx and Hegel and stuff like this, but they never actually like explain why they're doing what they're doing, which you would think is important. Which, and it's also like the weird thing, which is that I think critical race theory and social justice are very explicit about what they want, right? What they want is a just society, and they're explicit in what that just society looks like, and so they're critiquing the society to end up where they want to go. They're not hiding it from you. They want a world where people are treated equally, respectfully, with dignity, stuff like this, right? But they seem to like forefront all their stuff and never tell you what their purpose is, which seems very, like, to me, far more obfuscating than the critical race people, right? Especially because I think with critical race theory and stuff, the reason why they might use language that other people don't like is simply because of their own discipline and sort of like their history of defining things a certain way, much in the same way that physics uses jargon that other fields won't use, etc. Right? But as to the problems, so what I can take or what I've gathered from watching a bunch of their videos is the first and foremost, which should be obvious to everyone, what's sort of like behind why they hate critical race theory and why they want to connect it to Marxism is because to them Soviet communism is bad. They'll say, and Chinese communism is bad. So both these things, they killed millions and billions and trillions of people, all people who've never even existed. They've just killed them all. And these two are like they're the most evilest things that ever happened. Now, I have my own criticisms with Soviet Russia and communist China, but I don't use them as the benchmark for why, say, communism or socialism generally is bad. But I will frame here one of their main reasons for being against critical race theory and the reasons for wanting to tie it to Marxism always tends to go back to Marxism is Soviet communism, is communist China, is bad. The other thing that is sort of like hidden behind a lot of what they say, which you'll also find common in a lot of these discussions, is that they tend towards an appeal to nature as opposed to nurture, right? So, you know, the old nature nurture debate, when everyone should know at this point that it's all of the above, that this isn't a true dichotomy. But they want to claim that the social justice theory people or critical race theory people all want to say that it's nurture, that genes, nature doesn't matter, and they will argue that genes do matter. You can't change your sex, you can't change your gender. Hierarchies are just listen to Jordan Peterson tell you all about hierarchies. They love Jordan Peterson. So there's always this appeal to that somehow the social justice people are doing the wrong thing because they're going against nature. The other is that it causes conflict. And this one is like trivially true, but also kind of like silly in how they portray it. So they want to argue that all this talk about critical theory, critical race theory, social justice is all to divide people, turn people who are happy workers into angry workers, and it's not good because it'll destroy society and create conflict and division. When it's like, or, or it doesn't create the conflict, but it explains an already existing conflict, which is that people don't like racist people and therefore want to come up with a way to sort of describe why it is that people still continue to be racist. And one way is to look at it through a lens of sort of like structural racism or other things that these people like James Lindsay really don't like, right? So it's like it's this weird move of like you don't want to tell me that I'm racist because I'll be upset and angry about it, and then therefore I will bring down society with us and it'll create like conflict, right? Which is a really terrible a terrible way of dealing with this, right? Sometimes a conflict is good because we need to destroy the bad thing, but they of course want to keep a hold of the thing that we're saying is bad, and they think that you're bad for then starting the conflict, even though I would argue you being a racist in the first place is starting the conflict. Lastly, and this one should be pretty obvious, but they love individualism, right? I think they've said in several talks that rights don't belong to a collective. They don't belong to a group. It's all about individualism. So I told you about like the happy worker thing, right? Like they had one talk, and maybe we'll watch it in a future video. He talked about how Marcuse came in and like took people who were otherwise happy and made them like dissatisfied for being like why like made them dissatisfied by pointing out, being like, you don't like your job, do you? And it's like, well, they loved their job before, but now Marcuse somehow made them hate their job. And it's like, no, they probably hated their job, and Marcuse is coming and explaining why they hate their job. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with all of Marcuse such that his explanation for why they hate their job is accurate, but that it's all, they're like, but the point of like society is to be an individual and to work, and capitalism and individual effort and meritocracy, and the social justice people want to destroy that. So those are the things that undergirds all of this. And the thing that really fucking frustrates me about watching James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, all these fucking people, is that they never really talk about those underlying presuppositions and why they're good. Why is individualism good? Why is conflict, avoiding all conflict, good? Why is Soviet communism bad? You know, because once you start getting into there, you get into a nuance where it's way more easier to point out why they're wrong. So all they do is shift the discussion to talk about Marcuse and Hegel and all these, and there's the Frankfurt School and all this shit, where you're moving it away from the more let's say meatier subject, which is actually dealing with why your presuppositions are the right presuppositions. Because I think they're fucking wrong.
A fun anecdote about the Frankfurt School. This one time Adorno, I can't remember what it was he did that like provoked a bunch of like student protests targeted towards him. I think it might have been like not supporting the student protests enough. And his students responded by going like right up to his desk in the middle of lecture, and then like female students would like flash him, and he would like cover his face with the briefcase and just like freak out a whole bunch about it, and then 6 months later he died of a heart attack.
Why? Wait, why did he?
So like these guys are losing their. Oh, just because like it was too far, it was too obscene, it was like too like, whoa. But you know, these people are just like, Frankfurt School were just like a bunch of academic nerds. They didn't like lay down revolutionary anything. They were mostly just like critical about the societies that they lived in, because the society that they lived in had led to the fucking Nazis.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just an anecdote that I really love, and I think it was called like Brest Incident or something like that. It was,
wow,
you know, solidarity with the students in their struggle against the Frankfurt School, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there's many. Sorry, I was fixing my camera throw. Ooh. There's many criticisms that you can level against the Frankfurt School for sure. And the thing is, even James Lindsay, in watching a lot of the stuff that he does, references the fact that there's like that they aren't Marxist in the same sense as Marx was a Marxist. I guess that's, you know, weird phrasing.
Marx was not a Marxist.
No, well, I mean, I joked, like, listening to this whole conversation makes me laugh too, because like I have this book here that is Marxism, an historical and critical study, and James Lindsay wants to say that Marxism is critique, like that is what Marxism is, when Marx had a particular critique, and the family relation that James is making is more of like the lineage of critical theory, which yes might derive from a Marx, but it's not like it's a method, but it's not what Marx was doing, right? So it's like interesting of like what James would be saying is this person's using Marxism to Marxism. Just, when it's like, no, like critical theory is something it's been around for a while. I think if anything, and we'll hit on that, is Marxism just put like a more clearer focus on critical philosophy in that sense. But I had sorry,
just back to the Adorno anecdote.
Okay. I mean, yours had
he had called the cops on the student protests, and that's why the student protesters were really pissed at him. And so in April 1969, students disrupted a lecture course to demand that Adorno engage in ritual self-criticism for his calling to the police, and female students bared their breasts to him, ostensibly in an effort to expose his bourgeois prudery. The course that was being protested was canceled, and then Adorno died of a heart attack a few months later. And it was called the Brest Action.
Solidarity with the Brest Action. All right.
Yeah. Also, like, Adorno was a good media critic. We like his writings, but
well, I think
also he was a funny little bald man.
No, and I don't know if it was Adorno or Marcuse, and I think it might come up in one of the videos about them being upset with jazz or something like this. So it's like they had like
That's Adorno,
yeah, they had their own weird sort of like their own presuppositions that weren't themselves critically analyzed appropriately, right? Like, I don't know, like that to me says we need more critical analysis, not that critical analysis is bad, you know? But whatever. The last thing I want to say before we start watching this video. I get a lot of chats in the comments about ad hominems. And I just want to say, I don't think that all we do here is insulting in form of argument. I would actually say that most of what we do is pointing out why something is wrong. But then people get really like, you know, they get the faint. They get so faint and like, oh, when we like laugh about how fucking moronic some of the shit these people say. And we laugh, and like that's how we respond to it. And somehow they take that as being evidence of us like not being charitable or not dealing with the arguments. And it's like, what did you miss all the things surrounding the insult? Which is why it's not an ad hominem. You know, it would be one thing if I was like, James Lindsay is an idiot and therefore he's wrong, which would be an ad hominem because I'm arguing that his character is the reason why you shouldn't believe him. And that's a fallacious argument, right? But we're not doing that. We're pointing out why they're wrong and then calling them idiots, which, if anything, is an appropriate inference, you know? So I'm sorry if our insults and laughing are triggering to you and you can't get past that to appreciate the argument we're making. But at least if you're going to comment on this video, comment it by addressing the actual things we say and not by us being like, James Lindsay is a fucking idiot. Which, let's be real, I feel that James Lindsay is a fucking idiot. But don't let that be like a deterrent from actually listening to the other shit I have to say.
Hello, my rebels. Hello, my rebels. I'm a good boy. I'm a weirdo.